My wife came back for her first love, David, and is now forcing me to divorce her. Whether you like it or not, this marriage has to end. Seeing the alimony on the divorce agreement, I quickly signed my name and was so excited that I actually stood up from my wheelchair. My wife was stunned. The story is about to begin. If you like it, remember to like and subscribe. After an unexpected death, I found myself reincarnated as the male supporting character in a romance novel. When I came to, I discovered I was sitting in a wheelchair, having become James, a wealthy and privileged playboy. 4 years ago, I met the female protagonist, Sophia, at a bar and fell in love with her at first sight. I used every means possible to force her into marriage. Sophia came from a poor family and initially resisted me fiercely. Later, her father went bankrupt and committed suicide after failing in business, leaving behind a huge debt. To repay her father's debts, she had no choice but to marry me. After marriage, she remained cold towards me and wouldn't let me touch her. We often argued. Recently, with the return of her first love, David, the arguments have become even more frequent. A few days ago, she asked me for a divorce, but I refused, leading to a big fight. I accidentally missed a step and fell down the stairs, breaking my leg. Suddenly, the door opened, and I saw Sophia walk in, her usually indifferent expression still on her cold face. She handed me the divorce agreement. James, the person I love is David. Now that he's back, you have to divorce me, whether you like it or not. I opened the divorce agreement and was stunned when I saw the alimony amount. I widened my eyes and counted it several times. It was $8 million. This number was so incredible that it made me want to laugh in my dreams. In real life, I was just an ordinary worker who could never earn this much money no matter how hard I tried. I was about to get rich. After James' parents died in a plane crash, the company was handed back to its original owner. But he was a good-for-nothing, uneducated man, and the company quickly faced a crisis and went bankrupt. He also squandered all the family's wealth. Meanwhile, Sophia, after years of hard work, had become an extremely wealthy and powerful female CEO, and she was very generous. I agreed to the divorce, and Sophia looked at me in disbelief. You really agreed to the divorce? Her shock was understandable, considering that just a few days ago, I had refused to divorce her and even threatened to jump off a building if she kept pressuring me. I suppressed my inner joy, subtly pinched my thigh, and put on a sad expression. Yes, I've reflected on it. To truly love someone, you have to set them free. So let's get divorced. Every second of hesitation is a disrespect to the money. I quickly signed my name and then stood up from the wheelchair in excitement. Sophia was completely bewildered. Didn't you break your leg? I looked down and was amazed to find that my leg no longer hurt and had healed. It seemed that when one is in high spirits, even a fracture could heal quickly. Shall we go and finalize the divorce now? I urged. Sophia scrutinized me, and I coughed lightly a few times. Aren't you always busy with millions of dollars worth of business every minute? I don't want to waste your time. The sooner we get divorced, the sooner I can get the money. Just as Sophia was about to speak, her phone rang. She answered it and spoke softly to David on the other end. Watching her gentle expression, I shook my head. Over these 4 years, James had been completely devoted to Sophia, but she had never shown him any kindness, let alone affection. James was just a big fool. Sophia put away her phone and was about to leave when I called out to her. You're not going to get the divorce certificate, I have something else to say. She hurried away without another word. Watching her retreating back, my heart ached. When would I get that $8 million? I glanced around the room. This villa was bought by Sophia, and James had sold all the properties under his name to pay off debts. Now he was virtually penniless. The next morning, as I got up and went downstairs, I happened to see Sophia and David walking in hand. When she saw me, Sophia's expression became a little awkward, and she subconsciously let go of David's hand. I kept a straight face, but inside I thought, she has time to be sweet with another man, but no time to go through the divorce procedures with me. David looked at me with a provocative gaze, but I ignored him and turned to have breakfast in the dining room. After a while, David walked over and sat in the chair opposite me. James, I've never seen such a shameless man who clings on and refuses to divorce. I rolled my eyes. Didn't Sophia tell you that I've agreed to the divorce? David clearly didn't believe me. Don't pretend. Let me tell you, don't think you can keep leeching off her. The next moment, I saw David splash milk on his own face and let out a loud cry. Hearing the noise, Sophia quickly walked over and, without even asking what happened, glared at me and said, James, what are you doing? I was speechless. She didn't even ask and just assumed I had splashed the milk on David. I didn't do it, he did it to himself. Sophia angrily interrupted me. James, apologize to David. I was so angry that I cursed. No way. I said it wasn't me. David looked at me with a triumphant expression in his eyes, but then he turned to Sophia and said, "I'm fine, Sophia. Don't be angry. James didn't do it on purpose." David's sweet words only intensified Sophia's anger towards me. As she wiped David's face with a tissue, she shouted at me, "If you don't apologize, get out of here." I snorted coldly, "Fine, I'll leave. It's better than staying and watching you two make me feel sick." I grabbed a sandwich and an egg from the dining table and left quickly. Judging by this situation, I thought I would soon be divorced and get the alimony. So I went around the nearby housing complex, thinking of picking out a house first and then buying it as soon as the money arrived. In the evening, I went to a bar. Half an hour later, in the private room, I was hugging two young and pretty girls, enjoying myself, when I sensed a gaze on me. I opened my eyes and saw Olivia, a wealthy heiress and also Sophia's business rival. They had a falling out during a project competition last year. And since they were of similar age and often compared to each other, they were always competitive. Also, because I blindly defended Sophia, Olivia would always mock me whenever she saw me. At that moment, Olivia stood with her arms crossed, looking like she was waiting for a show. "What do you think would happen if Sophia knew you were flirting with other women outside?" In the past, I would have panicked. But now, I leisurely picked up my glass of wine, looked at her, and asked, "Would you like something to drink?" Olivia was taken aback, not expecting this reaction from me. "Aren't you afraid that I'll tell Sophia about your antics at the bar?" I laughed and said, "That's hilarious. What do I have to be afraid of? I'm not James, who's blinded by love. Go ahead and tell her if you want. If Sophia finds out I'm at the bar and gets angry enough to drag me to the divorce office, that would be even better." Olivia chuckled sarcastically. "You didn't get dumped by Sophia, did you?" I took one look at her, and I was just waiting for her to get rid of me. But she's just too indecisive. Olivia stared at me, her eyes probing. I laughed again and said, "By the way, I didn't bring any money. Could you cover the bill for me?" I only realized after sitting down that I didn't have any money on me, but the girls were already called, and the drinks were ordered. What could I do? I was planning to call Sophia to pay the bill, but now I don't have to. Olivia continued to stare at me without speaking. I explained, "I really didn't bring any money. If you cover the bill for me, I'll treat you to a meal another day." The original owner was now a penniless man. Of course, he had no money. After looking at me for a while, Olivia raised her eyebrows and said, "All right." I was delighted and called in two more girls. Since it wasn't my money being spent, I didn't feel the slightest bit of pain. After leaving the bar, as I was hesitating whether to go back or not, I received a call from Sophia. "My mom found out about our divorce and she's very upset. Come with me to see her tomorrow." Sophia's father's suicide had left a shadow over her mother, leading to her depression, so Sophia was worried that the news of our divorce would be a shock to her. I refused. "We're almost divorced anyway. It would be awkward to see your mom. Besides, she'll probably try to persuade us not to divorce, and that's not going to happen. It would affect my plans to get rich." Sophia paused for a few seconds, then softened her tone. "My mom has mentioned it to me several times already, asking me to bring you back to see her. Could you just come with me this once?" After thinking for a moment, I said, "If you give me the Ferrari in the garage, I might consider it. After going bankrupt, I had to sell all my cars and now I have to take taxis everywhere, which is very inconvenient." Sophia agreed. Although Sophia had become wealthy and powerful, her mother still lived in the old apartment building and didn't move to a big villa because she didn't like to change her lifestyle. When we arrived the next day, it happened to be mealtime. Sophia's mother had prepared a big table of dishes, saying they were all my favorite foods. During the meal, she kept serving me food. "James, look at you, you've lost weight. Come on, eat more." I smiled and served her some food. "Mom, you eat too." Sophia's mother's face lit up even more. "James, don't worry, I only recognize you as my son-in-law. As for those other men, forget about it." There was a reason why Sophia's mother liked me so much. Previously, in order to win Sophia's favor, James had extended his affection to her mother, visiting her often, chatting, and helping her with chores, just like a real son. It was James who had paid off the debts left by Sophia's father. Compared to David, I was much more reliable in her mother's eyes. Hearing this, Sophia looked helpless but didn't say anything. David was Sophia's senior in school, and they had dated during their studies. Later, when David went to work in another place, he broke up with Sophia. Sophia's mother had never been particularly fond of David, thinking that his appearance and personality were not suitable for a lifelong partner. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Sophia thought it was the neighbor and got up to open the door, only to see David standing outside. "Why did you come?" David took Sophia's hand and walked in, saying to Sophia's mother, "Auntie, Sophia and I truly love each other." Please let us be together. Then he looked at me and said, don't force Sophia to marry a man she doesn't love. She won't be happy. Sophia's mother's face changed abruptly. My daughter is already married and she is very happy. Don't even think about interfering in their marriage. David emphasized, Auntie, Sophia loves me. She will only be happy with me. Sophia's mother was furious and pointed at David, saying, get out of my house. Sophia broke free from David's hand and went to support her mother, saying, David, stop talking. Sophia's mother picked up a bowl from the dining table and threw it on the ground, glaring at David and shouting, get out. You are not welcome here. Seeing this, Sophia quickly pulled David out of the house. I poured a glass of water for Sophia's mother. Mom, calm down. People with depression can't have too much emotional fluctuation. Sophia's mother took a sip of water and then said, James, Sophia is too naive. Don't take it to heart. I smiled and said, Sophia is now my cash cow. Why would I take it to heart? A few minutes later, Sophia came back. Her mother looked at her sternly and said, if you want to be with David, then don't consider me as your mother. Sophia was very troubled by this but didn't dare to say anything against her mother. I kept silent and continued eating. After the meal, Sophia and I left. As soon as we got in the car, I said, there's nothing else to do now, let's go get the divorce certificate. I added, as for your mom, let's keep the divorce a secret from her for now. If needed, I can come over and keep her company. Your mom's cooking is great, and I'm happy to come over for meals. Sophia's action of fastening her seatbelt paused, and she turned to look at me. Ever since you fell down the stairs, you've changed. Her expression seemed to suggest that she thought I had hurt my head instead of my leg. I felt a bit guilty, touched my nose, and said, didn't you always hate my entanglement? Now that I've let go, it's a good thing for you. Looking at her delicate face, I turned my eyes and said, Sophia, you wouldn't have fallen in love with me and be reluctant to divorce, would you? Sophia frowned and said with disgust, don't flatter yourself. How could I possibly fall in love with you? As I expected, reverse psychology worked. The money was almost in my hands. We then arrived at the office. As soon as we got out of the car, Sophia's phone rang. I glanced at it and saw it was David. I don't know what David said, but Sophia became very nervous. She turned around, opened the car door again, and said urgently, David, don't be afraid. I'm coming right now. I frowned. At this critical moment, what was David up to again? Never mind, even if the king himself came, he couldn't stop me from getting divorced and becoming rich. I grabbed Sophia's arm as she was about to get back in the car. We're already here. Can we just finish the divorce procedures first? Sophia shook off my hand without hesitation. David's been in a car accident. He's in the hospital and it's serious. I have to go. I grabbed her arm again. He's had an accident, but you're not a doctor or a nurse. It won't do any good if you go now. We can go to the hospital after we finish the divorce procedures. Sophia was stunned for a moment, and I continued, besides, if you go to him with the divorce certificate, he might be so happy that he'll recover faster. Then I took Sophia inside. This time, she didn't shake off my hand. There were very few people today, and we were quickly up. I happily signed my name, while Sophia seemed a bit distracted. It was only under the staff's urging that she came back to her senses. I thought she was worried about David, so I said, don't worry, David won't die. He's the male protagonist, it's not that easy for him to kick the bucket. Sophia turned to look at me, her eyes having an indescribable depth. After a long while, she picked up the pen and signed. After we got the divorce certificate, the money also arrived in my account. Seeing the amount on my bank card, I couldn't help but smile. I really wanted to set off some firecrackers to celebrate. I looked at Sophia and said, you're going to the hospital to see David, right? Then I won't take your car. I'll just take a taxi back. Sophia suddenly called out to me, James. I looked at her questioningly. Sophia looked at my smiling face and squinted her eyes, asking, you seem very happy about the divorce. I thought she was being ridiculous. Hadn't she been pressuring me to divorce all this time? Now that we were finally divorced, she could be with David officially. As for me, with the $8 million in alimony in hand, how could I not be happy? I was overjoyed. With the divorce procedures all settled, I decided to stop pretending. I looked at Sophia and said, we're divorced now. There's no point in talking about this anymore. I wish you and David a long and happy life together, with many children. Without waiting for Sophia's reaction, I strode forward. The first step to becoming a successful man is, of course, to spend money. I went to the mall to shop, not even looking at the prices. I bought whatever I liked, and it felt absolutely wonderful. As I was leaving, I ran into Olivia. I remembered that this was her family's mall. Olivia looked at the bags in my hands and teased, "Are you going to be a licking dog again?" James had bought quite a few things from the mall for Sophia in the past, so calling him a licking dog wasn't far off. I smiled and said, "No, these are all for myself." I freed up a hand, took out the divorce certificate from my pocket, and showed it to her. "I'm divorced." Olivia was a bit surprised, then curled her red lips into a smile and said, "I thought you'd be attached to Sophia for the rest of your life." I waved my hand dismissively and said with disdain, "I don't want to be any kind of romantic hero. Besides, a woman as strong-willed and aloof as Sophia is not really my type." Olivia looked at me and said, "Didn't you say you were going to treat me to a meal last time? There's a newly opened restaurant nearby with great food." I had just mentioned it casually, but she took it seriously. But thinking about the bar tab, I gritted my teeth and agreed. At the restaurant, Olivia ordered a lot of dishes, like Australian lobsters and truffle steaks, which made my heart ache. I quickly took away her menu and said, "That's enough. I'm on a diet recently and can't eat that much." Olivia could tell how much it pained me and laughed, saying, "You're really stingy. You spent nearly $10,000 at the bar last time." I chuckled and said, "I'm an unemployed wanderer. How can I compare with you, a wealthy young lady?" Since I was the one treating, in order not to lose too much, I started eating ravenously as soon as the dishes were served and drank quite a bit of alcohol. The next day, after waking up from a long sleep, I found a woman lying next to me. Upon closer inspection, it was Olivia. I was so startled that I rolled off the bed. Olivia turned over, looked at me sleepily, and asked, "Why are you sitting on the floor?" I checked my clothes and saw that they were still intact, so I let out a sigh of relief. "We didn't have sex last night, did we?" Olivia sat up and gave me a disdainful look. "Of course not. You were drunk, so I just brought you back here." I felt relieved. I stood up and walked around the room. "Is this your place?" "Yeah, I bought this house recently." Recalling the conversation we had last night, she said, "Aren't you looking for a place to live? If you like it, you can stay here temporarily." My eyes lit up, and I asked tentatively, "How much rent do you plan to charge me?" Olivia thought for a moment and said, "These days, my dad has been pressuring me to go on blind dates, and I don't want to. If you pretend to be my boyfriend for a month, you can stay here for free." I adjusted my collar and said, "So, it's just acting, and there won't be any additional requirements?" Olivia threw a pillow at me. "What are you thinking?" Her villa looked quite valuable, and it wasn't too much to ask to just pretend for her. I had no reason to refuse such a good deal, so I agreed. After breakfast, I went back to Sophia's villa to pack my things. There wasn't much to pack, mainly just some documents. Unexpectedly, as soon as I entered, I saw David coming downstairs in a bathrobe. He looked perfectly fine, lively and energetic, not at all like someone who had been in a car accident. As soon as David saw me, he put on an air of the master of the house and ordered the servant to bring tea for me, the guest. I ignored his little tricks and was about to go upstairs when I saw Sophia coming down. Seeing me, Sophia looked a bit surprised, then glanced at David in the bathrobe and quickly said, "We were discussing work last night until very late, so David stayed here." I knew David worked in her company and asked curiously, "Why are you telling me this?" "I don't care. We're divorced now. You don't need to explain anything to me. You can be with whoever you want." Sophia didn't expect me to say that, and her face immediately turned ugly. I ignored her and went straight to my room to pack and leave. Sophia chased after me and stopped me, asking, "Do you need someone to drive you back?" I looked at her puzzledly and said, "You forgot that you gave me the Ferrari in the garage. I have a car." Sophia was taken aback for a moment. I must have been too busy and forgot about that. She seemed a bit strange, not quite like her usual self, but I didn't bother to figure it out and left in big strides. The day after tomorrow was Olivia's grandfather's birthday banquet, and Olivia asked me to accompany her as her boyfriend. That night, I made a grand entrance holding Olivia's hand, causing quite a stir. After all, I used to be part of the high society, even though I'm down on my luck now. Olivia introduced me to her grandfather as her boyfriend. Olivia's grandfather didn't look down on me, instead, he nodded with a smile, seemingly very satisfied. Then Olivia took me to meet her parents and all the relatives in her family. I cooperated fully throughout, with a perfect performance. I wasn't living in that luxurious villa for nothing. When everyone dispersed, I leaned down and whispered to Olivia, "You're being so high profile. How are you going to explain to your family in a month, especially your grandfather, who just urged us to get married?" If it weren't for my good acting, I almost slipped up. Olivia's voice was indifferent. "Don't worry, we'll deal with it when the time comes." Hearing her say that, I felt relieved. At worst, I'd just move out. Sophia also came and brought a birthday gift for Olivia's grandfather. Since we're all people who move in the same circles, we still had to put on a good face. Seeing Olivia holding my arm and smiling sweetly, Sophia's expression became a bit complicated, as if she was pondering something. But I didn't have time to guess what she was thinking. Just dealing with the relatives from the Lin family was enough of a challenge. After Olivia was called over by her grandfather, I found a spot to sit and eat. Suddenly, I heard Sophia's voice in my ear. "Are you with Olivia now?" I looked up at her and said, "Yes." Sophia's face immediately darkened. "James, do you know she's trying to use you to get to me?" Before I could respond, Olivia let out a disdainful snort. She walked over and sat next to me. "Sophia, you really have some nerve." Sophia's pretty face tensed up. "Olivia, don't think I don't know what you're up to. You think you can get to me this way? It's not going to work." I was really speechless. I was divorced from her. Why did she care who I was with? And getting to her? How ridiculous. "Miss Sophia, you're really overthinking this. Olivia and I are a mutual match, not what you think." Sophia's expression paused. I called her Ms. Sophia, clearly trying to distance myself from her. "James, wasn't the money I gave you enough? Do you have to be with her?" I shrugged. "Ms. Sophia, I'm just your ex-husband. You don't need to worry about my affairs." Sophia stormed off in a huff. In the following days, my life was quite comfortable. I spent my days eating, drinking, and having fun, driving the Ferrari around, occasionally pretending to be Olivia's boyfriend, going out with her, and enjoying free meals and drinks. It was a pleasant arrangement. In the evenings, I would go to the bar. As I passed by a private room, I stopped. I saw David, who was hugging a girl closely. Although I hadn't been following Sophia's news, due to her status, the news of her marriage to David had spread far and wide. I heard they only got the marriage certificate without holding a wedding, probably because of Sophia's mother. Seeing David with another woman didn't surprise me. He had only been with Sophia for her money. Now that they were married and he had achieved his goal, his true nature was revealed. I turned away and went back to my private room. After I left the bar, I saw Sophia and David standing not far away. They seemed to be arguing. David pushed Sophia away and then drove off with the girl in his arms. Sophia stood there stunned for a moment before turning around and catching my gaze. It was hard to pretend not to see her, especially with her tear-streaked face. In my memory, Sophia had always been very stubborn and rarely cried. Under the moonlight, she looked somewhat pitiable at that moment. But I didn't feel much. I just greeted her and was about to leave. But Sophia called out to me, "James." I looked at her and said, "What? James, have you been doing okay these days?" I nodded. "I've been fine." Sophia stared at me, her eyes filled with complex emotions. "I'm planning to divorce David." I looked at her suspiciously, thinking to myself, her divorcing David is none of my business. Why is she telling me this? I'm not her mother. Before I could say anything, she choked out, "Because I've realized that the person I truly love is you, James. I regret it. I shouldn't have divorced you in the first place." I was taken aback and quickly waved my hands, saying, "Don't even think about it. You should just continue loving David wholeheartedly." Sophia walked up to me and said firmly, "I know you still love me. Once I divorce David, will you be with me again?" I immediately refused. "No way." Sophia wiped away her tears and smiled at me, saying, "It's okay, James. I know you're angry with me, but I won't give up. I'll wait for you." On the way back, I kept thinking about what Sophia had said. Could it be that she really wanted to get back together with me? But I was just a pawn, and I just wanted to stay far away from her. When I got home, I found Olivia sitting in the living room, drinking. Seeing me, she waved at me and said, "You're back. Come sit with me and have a drink." I walked over and sat down next to her. I originally wanted to talk to her about Sophia, but seeing her drunken state, I didn't mention it and just picked up the bottle and started drinking. The next morning, I was woken up by the doorbell. Rubbing my eyes, I sat up and saw Olivia lying on the sofa opposite me, remembering that we had fallen asleep on the sofa after getting drunk last night. I got up and went to open the door, only to find Sophia standing outside. Given her capabilities, it wasn't surprising that she knew I lived here. Sophia held up the dessert she was carrying and said with a smile on her face, "I remember you really like desserts, so I bought them specially." Before I could say anything, I heard Olivia's soft voice, "Who is it?" She walked over to me, wrapped her arms around my waist, and cooed, "You were such a tease last night. I can't get up today." The dessert in Sophia's hand fell to the ground, her body wobbled, she took a few steps back, and looked at me with wide eyes, saying, "You live here with her?" Olivia leaned on me and said coldly, "You can check if you want. This is my house." Sophia looked very upset. I looked down at Olivia and said, "Go wash up first. I need to talk to her for a moment." Olivia paused for a few seconds, then let go of me and turned upstairs. Sophia's eyes were red-rimmed as she said, "James, is there really no chance for us?" I earnestly persuaded her, "Snap out of it. If it weren't for David's infidelity, you wouldn't have thought of me, let alone feel regret. You don't truly love me." Sophia shook her head. "No, James, I do love you. I wasn't completely indifferent during our 4 years of marriage. I just always thought I loved David, which is why I rejected you. On the day we got the divorce certificate, I actually hesitated. I realized I couldn't bear to part with you, you meant something to me." I breathed a sigh of relief inwardly, grateful that we had successfully divorced. Seeing that I couldn't dissuade her, I said, "Sophia, I can't keep revolving around you forever. As you just saw, Olivia and I have a good relationship." Sophia bit her lip, on the verge of tears. If it were the old James, he would have rushed to comfort her out of heartache, but now I just wanted to stay as far away from her as possible. I closed the door and went upstairs to the room, where I saw Olivia applying skincare products. I walked over, and she let out a cold snort. "I thought you'd leave with her." Looking at her pouting face, I knew she was angry. Come to think of it, she looked quite adorable when she was mad, like a little goldfish. I rarely called her by her name so directly, "Olivia." She turned to look at me, her eyes revealing tension. "You're not thinking of getting back together with Sophia, are you?" Her suspicion wasn't unfounded. After all, the original owner did love Sophia quite a bit. Olivia put down the skincare product in her hand and walked up to me. "If you still have feelings for her, then I really will look down on you." Before she could finish her sentence, I leaned down and kissed her forehead. Olivia was stunned, her cheeks flushing red, and she stammered, "What do you mean by that?" I chuckled softly. "Actually, I've noticed for a while that she likes me. It's hard to hide when you have feelings for someone." I looked at Olivia and formally asked, "Olivia, would you like to be my girlfriend now?" Olivia was taken aback for a moment, then playfully punched me on the arm. "You are such a tease." I teased her on purpose. "Do you need to think it over before deciding whether you like or dislike me?" She grumbled, "I hate you, I really hate you." I pretended to be indifferent. "All right then, I'll just go back to Sophia." As I turned to leave, Olivia panicked and grabbed my ear. "If you dare, I'll break your leg." I smiled. I wouldn't dare. Olivia then realized I was just teasing her and, with tears in her eyes, hugged me. "Do you like me?" I wrapped my arm around her waist. "Yes, I do." Although Olivia could be a bit willful, being with her made me feel relaxed and happy, completely different from being with Sophia. As for Sophia, it was said that David refused to divorce her and continued to spend her money, living a life of debauchery and keeping several women. With no other choice, Sophia had to file for divorce, and in the end, David left with nothing. The day she got the divorce certificate, she came to me and said excitedly, "James, I'm divorced. Will you come back to me?" I looked at her, as if she had forgotten that I had refused her last time. I coldly said, "Sophia, I don't love you anymore. Don't come looking for me again." To be precise, I never loved her. The one who loved her was James, not me. Olivia happened to walk by at that moment, and I held her hand, saying, "Olivia and I are getting married soon." Sophia seemed to freeze, murmuring, "You're going to marry her?" I nodded and said, "Yes, let's part ways amicably and don't disturb me again." Sophia burst into tears immediately. "James, I truly regret it. I regret divorcing you." I didn't respond to her anymore and walked past her, holding Olivia's hand. After walking for a while, Olivia looked back and saw that Sophia was still standing in the same spot. She asked me, "You told her we were getting married. What if we don't end up marrying and she comes looking for you again?" Olivia was also surprised by Sophia's persistent attempts to get back with me. After all, she knew how proud and aloof Sophia could be. I stopped in my tracks and looked at Olivia's face. Who said I was lying to her? Olivia's breath caught in her throat, and she licked her red lips, her expression a little unnatural. "You weren't lying, then." Her words were cut short as I knelt down on one knee, took out a ring from my pocket, and in a gesture that clearly indicated a marriage proposal, I asked, "Olivia, will you marry me?" Olivia was so surprised that she covered her mouth with her hand. She never expected me to propose to her. She was deeply moved and, with tears in her eyes, she said, "Yes." I smiled and placed the ring on her finger. Before long, I began to plan our wedding. Olivia was always worried that I would be too exhausted and told me that the wedding didn't have to be too grand and could be simple. I ruffled her hair and said with a smile, "But I want to give you the best." On the wedding day, both Olivia and I were very happy, and I believed that we would be very happy in the future. Later, I heard that Sophia had also attended my wedding, although I didn't notice her. A year later, I opened a restaurant, which became very popular. Sophia would often come to patronize it, but I never paid her any attention. Until one day, when she saw me helping Olivia, who was 5 months pregnant, she completely broke down and ran out of the restaurant crying. It turned out that she had been waiting for me to divorce Olivia, but seeing that we were going to have a child, she realized that it was over between us. After that day, she disappeared completely.